All right, let's get started. Hi there, I am Erin with Wacom, and I just wanted to welcome everyone who's joined us today. We are here to talk about optimizing your artistic workflow with Rebelle and Wacom. And I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go through before we get into the discussion. Our time here is scheduled for 60 minutes. We will do our best to stick to that. We have some exciting content to share with you. This session will be recorded. We are holding some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions for our presenters, go ahead and put them in the Q&A in the Zoom, and we will be sorting through those and answering them towards the end of the session. We'll get to as many questions as we can as time allows. And just know that through the functionality of Zoom, if you post a question in there, that it does show your name attached to the question. And then for everyone that wants to refer to this later, we will be posting this session on Wacom's YouTube channel in a couple of days. So you can reference it after that. And now I am excited to introduce our speakers. We have three amazing artists here with us today. First is Daniel Ibanez. Daniel's a fine artist and an illustrator who works both traditionally and digitally. His digital technique has been heavily informed by his approach to traditional painting. And light, both literal and symbolic, is the core driver of his work, alla prima or direct painting, and is also his favorite subject matter. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Justice Frangipane. And Justice is a digital artist with over 30 years of experience. He runs a YouTube channel with over 30,000 subscribers and offers tutorials on software and hardware. He's a top expert in pen technology and tablet efficiency, and he's the primary tutorial creator for Rebelle with over 120 guides on advanced painting techniques. So welcome, Justice.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
And third, we have Sarajean Chung, who is also known as the One with Bear. Sarajean is an illustrator and comic book artist who specializes in a wide range of digital and traditional tools. She uses Rebelle regularly to create natural textures and assets for her comic, Sunshine Through the Willow Tree. So welcome, everyone. We are excited and thankful to have you here. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarajean to kick us off.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for spending your time here. And thank you so much, Erin, for that really lovely introduction for all of us. Thank you guys again for coming. And I'm super excited to share the panel today with Justice and Daniel. Even though I am relatively new to Rebelle, I've been using the software for a little bit of a year or so, and I've been using it primarily to create textures for my comics. But I feel like I am not super well versed in all of the features in it. So today I'm really excited to learn from these two experts just as much as you guys in the chat. Justice has done like a tremendous amount of work for Rebelle's tutorials, and his tutorial is actually where I learned Rebelle from. So Justice, maybe we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about how Rebelle set itself apart from the other digital software, like how its paint engine works? Can you show a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So Rebelle is my favorite painting program for a bunch of different reasons. There's a lot that it does different. I'm going to hide this. All right. So you guys can all see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Rebelle has a whole bunch of different layers, and understanding those layers and how they work together is part of what makes Rebelle special. Rebelle has a canvas that has texture. You can see zooming in, it's got a tremendous amount of detail. This is called nanopixel. And besides it just looking like it has texture, it actually has functional texture. which means that if I paint over the surface of this canvas, and they have a lot of canvases that you can purchase and a lot of canvases that come with the software, you'll notice that the ridges in the canvas texture actually play a role. And this is something that allows you to create art like you would in a studio, but you can do it digitally. And I'm a big fan of the way that like thick paint goes on the canvas. So here, let me increase the loading. So in the oil and acrylics properties on the left, I'm sliding the loading slider up. I'm going to push heavy on the screen, and you can see that I've got this thick impasto. I'm going to turn off the other feature right now, the metallics. But you can see I've got this beautiful thick impasto. If I bring the loading down, it does something like we would expect it to do with traditional media. You can see it laying right into the grooves and ridges of this paint. And it's beautiful the way that it flows together. If I grab a palette knife, you can see it cuts through and blends those colors the same way that you'd expect it to. These things working in harmony, plus like some of the really cool features that they have, like metallics. Here, if I throw in some metallic paint, and then we move around the screen, you're going to see something that you don't see in any other programs. So this is really therapeutic for me. I have more stress in my life than I've wanted to have. And so like being able to play with colors, there's something that's very cathartic and very healing when you're working with colors that work the way that they work in nature. So I'm very, very happy with this. But then there's something different about Rebelle, and that it's not like any other digital program I've used before, because you don't have the kind of expected behavior that you would from digital media. You have something that feels alive, and it feels like you can have those happy accidents like we've heard of artists describing in the past, like these things that happen that you wouldn't necessarily expect would happen in digital media. So here, if I take a little watercolor and I put it over the top, you're going to see this diffuse out to the side. And this is just, it's so organic. And it works in a way that you wish that artwork could work, right? Like how cool is that?
Mhm.
That's so insane.
It's a different level, right? Like that's not something that you expect to be able to do, but it's something that I think we all wish we could do. We want to play, and we want something that plays back with us. And this is the only program I've used where I feel like the software is responding to me, not just dead, but you know, like I've said before in my tutorials, it's a living canvas. It's really a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Go ahead.
with the complexity that we see inside of the canvas, there are a lot of settings, and I think this is necessary when you're trying to replicate reality. And the real world would have a lot of settings if it were a video game. And so having the ability to play around and tinker with some of those is really important. I'm going to clear this canvas and then show a little bit here. So I'm going to do some thick impasto here. You can do really cool custom brushes, by the way, in Rebelle, almost without limit. Okay, now here we have absorbency, re-wet, texture influence, darkening, diffusion speed, all these different things you can create drips, which we will turn on for now. The metallics, you can turn down the strength and the reflectivity. But I want to show right up here, actually, absorb and re-wet. So just in real life, where you have paint that might be a little bit more viscous, that travels a little more, you can adjust settings here. So bring re-wet all the way up. and do that same thing. And notice the difference between how these go. This is going to eat away at the texture underneath. Where when this is set the other direction, down low, you can see it just fills in the cracks. It has a very different experience. If you're on a different canvas, it's going to have a different experience. The amount of water over here on the left in the properties and watercolor, I changed this setting. We're going to have a very different experience, how much it flows. You can see these drips. And there's just so much that you can do just to play inside the software.
And then once you have the paint down, can you then still move the paint around? Because I noticed that you're using the dry tool, but is there other ways of manipulating the paint?
Yeah, one of the things that I do a lot of portraits, and I struggle a lot with proportions. I would love to, at some point, be able to say, hey, you know, every time I draw that iris, it's exactly in the right place and it doesn't look freaky. But
You and me both.
really, yeah, a lot of the times it does. It just looks really weird. And so I have to go into lasso selecting and moving it around, scaling, and that's what I've always done in the past. And it's painful. It really is. It's not a good experience. And so like being able to use the new Liquefy tool. So right here, this is keyboard shortcut S. You'll notice shortcuts in the top left corner of my canvas as well. Keyboard shortcut S, and then you have to select over here, not smudge, but in one. This is Liquefy push. This is something that Rebelle does very, very well. They use a fractal engine driven by AI, and it allows you to move and contour, expand, contract shapes, but without losing fidelity. So here in the past, it would be ruined. Like this is what it normally looks like. It blurs it in order to bend it. But with the Liquefy tool they have in Rebelle 7, I've been really, really happy with how this looks, and allows me to fix a nose or make sure the lips aren't crooked, you know, all sorts of different things, which you can do with grids and different things as well, not just the Liquefy tool inside Rebelle, but this is the one that I use personally.
That is fantastic. So, from my understanding, you come from a digital artist perspective. Can you talk a little bit about colors and pigment from a digital artist perspective?
Yeah. So I would love to say that I have a lot of traditional art friends. I don't. I have a couple. And one of the things I think that keeps digital artists and traditional artists from really connecting is that we're talking different languages. You know, if you're talking to someone, oh yeah, I use this. Well, let me show you this here before we go a little further. So in the color panel on the right, if you go down to color set and you turn on show color names, there's something here that I think actually bridges the traditional and digital mediums. So here, when I've talked to artists before and they're like, yeah, I used a gold ochre. Like, I have no idea what that means. No clue. And so now, because Rebelle uses a different type of color, not color, but color mixing process, you can actually use traditional pigments and they look and blend the way that we expect them to from traditional media, which is, for me, it connected something between myself and traditional artists that I haven't been able to do in the past. And it feels really cool. Like I'm learning something real, not just some made up name that some digital art company decided to use for a color. It's like actually something I could go to the store and buy and sit down and do traditional painting and get a similar response. And that's so cool to me.
Yeah, I actually had no idea this was a thing. This is fantastic for me because like you said, I used to buy paint and I always thought it was just fancy names from the companies, but I never knew it was like a regulated thing. But I think this is a really wonderful segment to Daniel, who has traditional background, and then you understand, like coming from a traditional artist perspective, like how do you use Rebelle? like what are the benefits or what are some of the tips that you have been using when it comes to color mixing?
Well, I'd be happy to jump in. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to Justice for that great demonstration and for all the great content on Rebelle's YouTube channel. Um, yeah, I think as a traditional artist, you brought up one of the things that was interesting to me about Rebelle right away, which was especially in Rebelle 7, that you have the color sets, which have my exact color palette that I use when I oil paint. I can use alizarin crimson and cad red light and pale yellow hue and all of the different colors that I'm familiar with from the art store from when I was a little boy. And not only is that really kind of useful, it's also comforting because sometimes when I would say the one thing that's kind of probably the most challenging for me in moving from traditional oil paint to digital is the color mixing. Everything else makes sense to me, but the color mixing was just so unusual for me coming from that traditional background. I When I look at a sky, I see titanium white, cerulean blue, sap green, a little bit of, I see the colors in my mind and what proportions I need to make that color of the sky. And so with Rebelle, you can literally click on the pigments, get your color set of oil paints, and literally mix those proportions of natural pigments, and it mixes naturally. So that's an amazing asset for those of us in transition.
Can you actually show us where to find that feature? Um, Peter, can you pin the
Oh, yeah.
camera? Thank you.
All right. So let me
Mhm.
get to. So here I'm over here on the right side of the screen, and you
Mhm.
can paint with the normal digital art features. Like you can have your layers with normal blend modes, which are super fun to play with. But if you want to go back to more kind of traditional, you click on pigments, and then there's all these very interesting things. You have color sets here. So you can look in and see all the different types of colors. And this would be something that Justice is super good at demonstrating. But within actually, can I show you something else real quick about color?
Absolutely.
All
Please.
right. So just a real quick tip for everybody. For me, um, when I was trained as a traditional artist, my focus was on value. We had to focus on painting value before anything else. So one thing I do when I set up my digital palette is I have the VSH sliders for values, saturation, and hue. So I like to work this way when I'm picking color. And then I like to also set a color set that's of the palette that I want to work in. And then even though that's there with the pigments, um, I still, I guess I've migrated more to this, but I do still use the pigments there for getting a color palette set up. All right.
That is very cool. So there are basically a ton of different options to mix your colors, like different ways of showing colors. You can create your own sets. And then you can, like if you're more used to how traditional color mix, then you can have that function enabled. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. And
Okay.
um, I think between that and the ease of use with reference photos, you have just this huge array of options for how to get good color in your images when working digitally with Rebelle.
Mhm. And because you like for traditional artists, usually you do have a wide range of brushes, right?
Oh my
I
gosh,
know.
yes.
Yeah, I know that traditional artists, we love buying tools all the time, even if we don't use them ever. So my understanding is that you create your own brushes. Like, can you give a little bit of tips on what you look for in traditional brushes and how they react to the canvas?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, for a quick demonstration of that, I'm going to go to this, this little scribble. When I make my brushes, I like for them to have a lot of the behavior that Justice described so well with his demonstration. And what I like to have, well, the reason I love Rebelle is that the brush behavior has what I would just call physics. The physics of the brush on the canvas is so realistic, and that, like you talked about, the happy accidents, the drip of the paint, the feel of the paint on the actual bump maps of the virtual canvas, everything works so naturalistically that a lot of times I feel like I almost forget that I'm painting digitally. It's that realistic. But going back to the brushes, if you can look at my screen here, all of these brushes are all mine. And so this little subset down here at the bottom are the brushes that come with the software, and they're great and they work wonderfully. But every single one of these is my own custom brush, and I just feel like they are they're just exactly how I want them to work. So you can see the difference between um, each one of these. In fact, before the session today, I was making new brushes because it's sort of like a secondary hobby for me. They all just have such cool properties. Um, and so sometimes I want them to be a little more viscous. Sometimes I want them to be more of a dry brush. Sometimes I want them to pick up the canvas texture more quickly. And other times I want it to be more impasto and flow over the surface. So I think with Rebelle, I want to show you really quickly the brush creator is this really, really robust panel. And it's a neat thing because if you're familiar with Photoshop, you'll be familiar with how this works. You have kind of a brush head, you have a grain. You can even set up a series of brush heads so that as you push harder or softer, the brush head will shift between different brush heads and give you different looks, which is unbelievable. And so you have stroke, shape and grain, paint, and textures. And each one of these is just a robust set of sliders that allow you to create almost every kind of brush you could imagine.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree. It's a really, really fun thing to kind of look into each attribute and just see how much it can change. And then just play around with how like it reacts to the canvas, all of the different grains. It is very fun.
It really is.
For sure. And because you're a traditional artist, you use a lot of reference photos. I think there is a reference panel in Rebelle. I've never personally used it, but can you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So let me pull that over. So here's the reference panel. And one thing I love about it is you can have a multitude of references up at any given moment. So if I close this one, you can see I can just load in, I can hit this import reference image tab, and I can load in, an infinite number of references, and I can do it in batch or individual. And then I can enable them, turn them on or off by clicking on this button. And what I really, really like about that is I know a lot of us work with mood boards or inspiration panels, and I don't like to have to leave my software to do that. I like to be able to make my mood board in action in the same software as I'm working in. And so in this case, I oftentimes use my secondary monitor as my mood board as I paint. And with Rebelle, you can kind of have an infinite number of those references, and it just works so flawlessly.
And then when you save the canvas, does it save that information with it?
Absolutely. It'll save the location, the scale, and the arrangement of all of those references. So you don't have to, if you kind of carefully arrange all of that on your secondary monitor, when you reopen the document, it'll all populate just as you left it. And then just to kind of show you this was something I was working on just before this. So here was the reference image, and I just did kind of a direct reference study. And what I love about this is the process is so akin to oil paint. What you have here, I usually use watercolor as my underpainting because it kind of simulates the turpentine and oil painting mixture that I usually use. And then I put my dark values on top of that, and then some more dark values working into the lights, and then kind of get to the fun part where you get to kind of finish the painting. So this was just a quick study I did literally maybe 30 minutes before I came online today. And even today, as I was working, I thought, gosh, I'm so grateful for this software because it works in such a naturalistic way that I actually feel like I'm getting better at oil paint when I use it. So, which is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. It's like a really nice way to understand colors, and because you don't have to have like the physical canvas to take up space, it's easy to kind of test out different color combination, and then maybe like people can bring this experiment back into the traditional art that they're working on and use that as their new reference, right?
Oh my gosh, that's so well said.
This is so cool. Just seeing the process, I could honestly watch this forever.
Well, thank you. If you are interested, I do a master series for Rebelle, so you can go kind of look at the process that I use for painting in the style of old masters, learning from some of our great art heroes.
Mhm. Yeah, I also have, this is completely just my personal question to you. Now, what is your favorite paper? Because I know
Ooh.
that in Rebelle, there are a ton of, it comes with a default set of papers, but then I think their papers are uniquely designed using ray tracing, right? So then paint can reflect very true to the way that you lay down the paint. So, like, which set of papers are your favorite?
I love that question because I there's everything from like the smooth slate, perfectly smooth surface that you would do if you were doing like a highly detailed illustration, or in my case, I'm more of the traditional kind of stereotypical artist who doesn't take care of my brushes properly and will paint and repaint over old canvases all the time. So I like the gessoed canvas texture because the panels have so much chunky mess on them. It
Mm.
simulates the way that I work at home when I'm repainting over a bad painting or sanding down a canvas and gessoing over it. And it has a lot of imperfection in it. And that's that's like a very familiar sort of feeling to paint on a surface like that. So I love the heavy gesso, the medium gesso, and the light gesso papers.
Mm.
And then in addition to that, um, because my brushes are often in a kind of a bad state of existence, I love the grunge brushes that are kind of the default brushes in Rebelle. You like
Right.
using the chunky kind of grungy brushes along with that heavy, chunky gessoed paper.
Right. Yeah, those are super, super fun.
Yeah.
Um, then I actually think that would be a good transition to my portion, because I can then show a little bit of how pen pressure works with all of that. So let me just give you a very quick view of the tablet that I'm working on right now. So this is a new tablet that is from Wacom. This is the Movink. So as you can see, it's the super, super thin, super tiny, very light, but the display is absolutely just fantastic. It's very vibrant. It reflects the color very, very truly. And so with combination with what Justice and Daniel mentioned about pigment mixing, it really reflects beautifully on this tablet. Now, so my task today is to show you a little bit of tips and tricks to how you can combine some of the shortcuts, some of the settings to kind of utilize and customize your workspace. Um, First of all, once you connect your Wacom product to any of your platform, you will see in the Wacom Center, this is the tablet name will show up, and this will be your control, be basically your customization panel. And the funny thing is, in the past, I never really quite bothered customizing with all of this, but once I learned just how much you can do with it, it's honestly really fantastic. And I think it's worth taking the time to look into all of these options. Number one thing that I want to show is actually turning off one of the things. Like you will notice, like right now, my cursor is following my pen very well, but my little pointer thing, that's a plugin, is not following that. And the reason why that is, you want to go into your pen settings. So the pen that you are going to be using on your tablet, it is going to show up right over here on the left. And you want to go into advanced. So right now it's not showing up properly, right? you're going to want to go into advanced and then turn off Windows Ink. So that is going to be this thing over here. So it's really funny because the Windows Ink really kind of messes up a lot of navigation. So this is number one thing when you get your Wacom tablet, turn this thing off. Okay, and the second thing that I really like to look at when it comes to customization is look at how many buttons are on your pen, and you can customize them, each individual button in here. But the most fun thing for me is the tip sensitivity. So when using a pen display like this, you can notice that, like, for example, right now I am applying a certain amount of pressure on this tablet. Now, this is how you look when the paint is showing up there. Now, that being said, if you're somebody who has very hard pressure on your tablet, like you put a lot of pressure on your tablet and you feel like you're not getting enough that pressure curve, you can change it to firm and then go back to here. You'll notice the same amount of pressure, it is giving less paint. In likewise, if you're somebody who is very soft or very light on your tablet, like for example me, and I try not to put too much strain on my wrist, then I will set the tip sensitivity to soft. And in this way, when I put the same amount of pressure, I am actually getting a lot more paint. So depending on how much strength you want to put in it, that is the feature that you can kind of play around with. Okay. And we will go into all of these customization very shortly, but you can click on each of these buttons and then have them set to different type of function. And you can just look through this, like for example, which click, you can set it to keyboard shortcut, you can set it to tablet function, co-op radar menu or grid menu, etc., etc. So it's very, very flexible, and you can do it on all of the shortcut buttons that's available on your device. For example, for the Movink, we have 2 buttons. There we go. We have 2 invisible buttons on each side and then 2 physical buttons on each side. So all of these I can go into deciding what they can pull up. Okay, just give me 1 second. So, all right, and the next thing that I will want to touch upon is the on-screen shortcut. Now, this thing has existed within the Wacom device for a very long time, but it used to have like a UI that I didn't quite understand. So today I'm going to kind of walk you through it. You can go into your on-screen shortcut and then you can create a new one. So let's say we want to create a new grid. So new grid panel over here. So click on that. And let's do a single row. So we'll do a single row of hotkeys. So what these are is basically a shortcut that can appear anywhere on your screen. And let's say if I want to do something like a redo, and I want to do undo, I can just go into individual button and then set that up. And for example, one of the things that I really like in Rebelle is the diffusion, right? Because like Daniel was, Justice was showing before, where you put the paint on and then they just blend really beautifully. Now, sometimes when they blend too much or too little, and I don't want that, I want that diffusion to pause, then, but it's like happening too fast and I just want it to like pause. I always have this little button, the pause diffusion that is in there. So once they bleed to a part where I kind of just want it to be like, okay, stop, right? That's the button that I press. And if you go into edit, shortcut, keyboard shortcut, and you can go under layer, you notice that the pause diffusion is set to D. And then what I would do is I would dry the layer. So this would prevent the paint to continue to bleed when I unpause it. So So these are two of the things that I really like to use. So one is D, one is F. And then I will go into here where I would just basically go keyboard and let's see, keyboard shortcut, and I'll hit D and I can name it fast dry. And then there is F. And that would be, oh, I think I messed that up, but you get, that last one was pause, and then this one is dry. But it doesn't matter what you name it. The function is still going to be there. And then you can also, if you don't want to look at the text, you can also just set it to icon. So for example, if I want this one to look like, let's see, because it's pause, then we'll do like a little thunder icon over there, or stuff like that. So it's very flexible. You can customize them all. I can set this one to yellow, or I can set this individual one to green. And what it does, basically, oh, come on now, there. When I launch it, there, let me pull that up for you. When I launch it, it'll give me this little tab. So let me pin that to the top. So now I have this always on the screen. And when I am doing painting, I can just click on here to be able to execute the action that I am doing, right? Like if I want to like pause the diffusion, I can just use this to pause, and then I can use the next button to dry it. So in this case, once you have everything kind of properly set up, you don't need to have any of your tab that's up there. And you can even unpin this. And let's say I actually have everything set up kind of. And now I have this particular panel that is mapped to the little touch button over there. So I can call it up whenever I want. I have a 3-finger touch to call it up or disable it. I can do that very freely. So all of this takes a little bit of time to kind of find your own flow, but there are a possibility to be able to customize. Now, the next thing that is really cool, and because looking at Daniel's setup, and I wanted to show you like a picture. This is a picture of my dad. So my dad is very into Rebelle. He loves Rebelle. But he also really appreciates using a pen tablet, which doesn't have a screen because it gives better posture. He can look ahead and then look at the painting. And I know that Daniel can probably give a little bit of insight into this because he also prefers painting ahead, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I found that you would think, yeah, I see him using like an Intuos tablet there, which I had an Intuos for many years, but I do think that even in this case, even in this use case, the Movink is still superior, not just because of the amazing Pen 3, but also the amazing screen, and how natural it feels to draw on it. And I love the sound of the stylus on the screen. But I think it's so nice to be able to work this way because the screen there, even if I'm not looking at the Movink, it's still there as a panel for all my tools, my mixing, because I use it as like a mixing palette. I use it for reference images. I use it as my mood board, and I can have all of that there, but then I can still paint on a big 32-inch monitor, which is my preference.
Yeah. So let me actually quickly show you guys how to do that. Because I basically kind of thought about this workflow when my dad was telling me about it. He was like, he likes painting ahead and looking at the monitor in front of him, but at the same time, he feels like all of the interface is taking up a lot of space. So here, let's do this. Let's have the color palette over here. And then we will also do, we'll also go to window and then co-op, where is it? The mixing palette, which is one of the things that I really like. So mixing palette is basically, think about it as your in real life painting palette, right? And then let's do a little bit of fun, just mixing color. So we'll go in there, we'll pick some colors over here. And don't worry, this one doesn't have pen pressure on there. You can just throw in a bunch of colors that you normally use. You can use a little blender icon over here. And then to blend the color to get those sort of semi-colors in between. Just basically any kind of colors that you want that you are going to be using in this painting. And then let's set it to color picking. So whenever I hover over into the mixing palette, it's going to switch automatically to the eyedropping. And then I'm going to move this entire Rebelle thing onto the monitor that is in front of me. And that is my dual monitor. Give me 1 second to set this up and I'll show you what I mean. Okay. And now let's go into the Wacom Center. Let's go into the Wacom Center. And then for me, I really like to have this set to the pen. So this pen, I have it set to something called a display toggle, which is under tablet, display toggle. Let's go into display toggle and look at what it does. So basically, it is telling me which monitor, whenever I press this button, the pen button that is on the bottom that I had set up, which monitor it's going to hop between. So right now I have my Movink, and then I have 2 additional monitors hooked up, but I don't need this one. So I can just disable that. And so now whenever I press this button, it's going to toggle between the Wacom Movink and also the monitor that is in front of me. I wish I had the 32-inch one that Daniel has, but I don't. So, so what are the results for this? So you can see this screen share right now. You are looking at my monitor that is in front of me. And then you're also looking at the Movink that is down on the left-hand bottom. And whenever I press this button, you'll notice that my cursor goes back up to the large monitor that is on the bottom. And when I press it again, it's going to come down here. And then I can basically use color picking all the time. Give me 1 second. So I can use this to navigate between the 2 monitors. And if your tablet has a touch functionality, then you can actually still use the touch. Like for example, right now my Movink has touch functionality. I can just seamlessly touch on a color and without having it interfere with my workflow that is on top. So in this case, when I let me just show you real quick how I have it actually set up. I will go into normally once I have a layout that I'm really happy with, I will export my layout, and then I would just save the layout that I really like. And then whenever I need to swap between layouts, I just call them back. So now you can see on the bottom over here on my Movink, I have all of my menus down here. So on the top, I can very easily just have my entire art full screen. And I still have menu control over here with just that button toggle on my pen. So I can just quickly press on that and it will jump between the 2. Now that's how I have it set up for those who want to use a pen display as a way to kind of consolidate all of your shortcuts and your menus, but you want to paint on a giant screen. So yeah, I think that's all of the little tips and tricks that I can show you guys. And do you guys have any additional thing that you would, let me check on the time. I think we're doing great on time. Do you guys have any additional thing you would like to add? Anything you thought to say?
I just want to say thank you for the demonstration of that. When we did this in preparation for today, that was a huge insight to me. And ever since I've kind of modified my workspace, and hopefully you can see on the screen share that that's how I have my stuff working right now, is I have menus and reference images and mixing palette on my Movink, and then um, on my big screen, I have my painting surface, and it just works so well. So thank you for that tip. It was really, really useful.
Yeah, of course. And this was super exciting for me because my dad was like, it helped him. So I figure there are other people like him who would probably find this interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. Just knowing that that's an option, that you can switch between where you're using the pen and still have touch working on the bottom, the Movink is really cool. You can see
Yeah,
that being so
I
useful.
actually didn't know that either in the past when I was using that, because I always had the touch turned off.
Mhm.
I like using the pen.
Yeah, having the gestures so you could map the gesture to call up the ExpressKeys, that is so cool. Having 3 buttons on the stylus instead of 2 is amazing how much of a difference that can make.
Yeah,
And all customizable.
absolutely. So do you guys feel comfortable getting into FAQs? Erin, do you have some questions
Yes.
for us? Yeah,
We do
awesome.
have some questions from the audience, and I'm going to kind of scroll in between chat and the Q&A section. If anyone has a question that they are curious about but haven't asked yet, please put it in the Q&A section on Zoom, and we will do our best to get to it. So I think this was answered in the chat, but I see it and just wanted to verbalize it. Which version of Rebelle do each of you use?
7
Rebelle
Pro.
7 Pro. Yeah,
7 Pro.
7 Pro.
So the Pro version comes with the metallic paint that Justice was showing, and also the nano texture, right? And I don't remember if the pigment mixing is that
Pigments
Pro?
is part of Pro.
Yeah.
Yeah, nanopixel, the fractal engine, which means the Liquefy tool works like a dream.
Yeah.
And then a handful of other features that are they're going to make your artwork better without
Yeah.
having to be a better artist. So get the Pro for sure.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I have to say, hands down, like the Pro for sure.
Awesome. There is a follow-up. I think this is a follow-up to this. Somebody asked Rebelle 7 Pro with what add-on, flame, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so Flame Painter is they have a couple different creative apps. Flame Painter, I believe, is the first app that was made by the owner of the Escape Motion software company, but it's not anything, we haven't demoed anything with Flame Painter today. So everything you've seen today can be done inside of Rebelle 7 Pro.
Yeah. And even the custom brushes I made could be made within the application as well.
Yeah. There's some really cool tutorials online about the Brush Creator series.
Hinted.
Awesome.
I would say though, I would add that I think for add-ons, even though I haven't tried any of the other software, but I got the papers.
Yeah, papers are worth it.
Yeah, papers are absolutely worth it. Like just I love the washi papers. They're so fun. Yeah.
Those are wonderful.
Yeah.
They're on their website. They have all of the papers listed, but then if you click on the papers, it'll show different media on that paper with diffusion and all sorts of different that like so you can get a really good feel for how charcoal looks on it and how watercolor diffuses on it, thick paint and all of that. I don't think there's a way to make your own at this moment in the app. I don't know. There might be some way to make your own papers inside of some other software, but I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, because I think their papers are very uniquely made, right? Like with incorporating ray tracing. So it's not just a texture. It is something that reacts to the paint.
Yeah. You can use something that's inside of I think it's a pro feature. Maybe it's not a pro feature. Structures inside of Rebelle 7 allows you to put your own kind of height maps on the page. So it's kind of like if you put a leaf underneath a piece of paper and then you use charcoal or pencil over the top and you get those relief marks, you can do that. And that's very easy to do. Any PNG image with contrast will work.
Yeah,
think
Justice
you did
actually
right.
has a great tutorial on structure. It's so fascinating to watch.
It is a really cool feature. I wanted to add something is that I am one of those artists that's super low tech. Like if you think about sports, the high tech sports, we need a lot of gear like climbing or hockey or something. I always wanted to do everything that required nothing. Like I'll play soccer, it's a ball, like I wanted to do the lowest tech of everything. And so I'm sort of like that with digital art as well. So it took me a long time to even explore the papers, but I was so glad when I did.
Mm.
Awesome. Okay, we have a couple of questions. I'm going to try and link them together because they're in the same theme. So, there's some questions about Rebelle with Photoshop. So, how about the way you use Rebelle with Photoshop? And kind of a complementary question is, I know that there's a Photoshop plugin. Does it have the same tool set and capabilities as what's shown here, or is it best to work standalone?
For the plugin, that is a pro feature, and it's one that it creates a live link in between Rebelle and Photoshop. So if you're in Photoshop and in Rebelle, so you have both programs open at the same time, you can add some text, warp the text inside Photoshop, go into Rebelle and see it update automatically. So that's a really cool way to work back and forth. You can export, I think you can export in PSD and import it in there, but that's not how the plugin works. You click the button and then make sure that the file is open in both programs.
The export is there, I think, as just a default option, and I use
Yeah.
that all the time.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Another similar question of using it with other software. Someone asked if Rebelle can be used with Affinity Suite applications. So I imagine it's a similar export. Do you guys know?
Yeah, I don't think they can export into Affinity's DWF format. I forget what Affinity uses, but I don't think there's an option to export into that, but you could export into PSD and open it in PSD and Affinity Designer or Photo, and it would be fine.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Someone was curious about, okay, Justice, this is for you. When you had your screen up, there was a brush category called Jay's Portrait Brushes.
Oh, yeah.
They're wondering, how did you create that and what brushes did you start with?
For the portrait ones, if I'm being really transparent, there's another drawing program that had a paint brush that I really loved the way it blended. And the rest of the program was decent, but they weren't updating it. And so I really wanted to pull in this brush from this other program, but I couldn't. So I spent like probably 8 hours trying to replicate it, drawing line after line, deleting it, throwing it in the proverbial trash bin. But it was a lot of fun, but a lot of work. For portraits, if I'm doing a portrait painting, I kind of play with the papers a lot as well. If I'm trying to do something with a little higher fidelity. And I drop the texture scale. Yeah, there's in Rebelle, there's certain types of painting that come very naturally in the software, which is something like Daniel Craze that has a lot of impasto and structure, and there's a whole bunch, but for something like Sarah Jean and I don't know how much texture she uses in parts of it, but some parts you don't want any texture. And so you can do both really well inside of Rebelle, just knowing to turn, like the texture scale down and using certain types of papers helps a lot.
Awesome.
I don't know if I answered that very well, though.
I'll let you know if they pop in with a follow-up.
Okay.
Okay, along the lines of texture and paper, someone said, I'm curious about printing work done in Rebelle that is created on textured paper or canvas. Does the texture show up in printing and look correct? Or do you need to also think about printing on actual textured paper or canvas?
The texture comes through in the image. So if you're printing on something that has a conflicting texture, you're going to see it. So there's going to be dark values in the light bumps of the canvas or whatever you're printing on if you're doing it wrong. So I would suggest printing on something with very little texture if you want the texture of the canvas in Rebelle to come through correctly.
Yeah, I have personally printed on just a flat photo paper that is reflective, and the textures of the paper and also the textures of the paint come through really, really well. But it's like Justice said, the paper that I'm using itself, it is not heavily textured. So I'm not printing on like those traditional papers. I'm printing on photo papers, right? So you can print it on matte photo papers or print it on the semi-gloss. I think semi-gloss actually looks really great for the oil style. And then complete matte for the watercolor ones.
And I've printed on kind of like a little bit of everything. And I think as long as you don't get too aggressive with your surface and too aggressive with your paper texture in Rebelle, it should work out. I like when I have my way and I have more time and I can work with a client that we want to do something really nice. We do use like the really high end cotton rag, archival, giclée kind of printing process. And you can get away with having good texture on the paper, but I would try to have like a similar texture. So if you want to work on like a watercolor paper in Rebelle, then print on a watercolor like paper in your actual physical printing process.
Actually, I have a question. Then when you are doing that, when you're printing on a watercolor paper, do you then disable your canvas first and then you just leave the painting layer?
Ooh, good question. I haven't done that. I typically leave it all
Oh,
in
you just
there.
leave it on? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know.
But I guess I don't usually print on papers with so much tooth that it's going to become, and I don't like that. I don't want it to get too dominant, when it gets to the printing process. Yeah.
Right.
Something really important when you're printing is making sure your color is correct. And that's probably like if you're looking at getting that canvas texture, definitely pay attention to your color. Rebelle has a handful of features. Like you can choose color management and choose what type of profile that you want to use if you're using sRGB or something else, Adobe. And then you can also proof the colors and see what colors don't show up correctly so that you can adjust it for the printer, and then working with the printer and going, okay, this is the making sure you're matching those settings from the printer and the software so both of those things come out looking correct. Is really important.
That's good advice.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, we have a lot of questions. I'm trying to sort through them. Someone else asked, when I open Rebelle, the screen is set up the way I like it, but it changes so I only see the painting canvas. Is there a way to set a default screen?
Yes. So you can, once you have all of your layout done, you can always make sure to export. Let me just quickly share my screen. So you can quickly go over to the top here to Window and then Export Layout. So once you have everything in the position that you like, just export layout and then name your export. And then the next time, if anything is to go array, then you simply import that layout. But other than that, it should remember, I think when you said if you only see the canvas, it is perhaps if you accidentally hit tab. So if you hit tab, it can potentially change the way that your layout looks.
Thank you, Sarah Jean. We have another question for someone that's new to Rebelle. So this person said, I like drawing long continuous lines with a watercolor brush. Is it correct to understand the diffusion doesn't begin until you lift up the pen, or is there a preference somewhere to make the diffusion live as I draw?
It does start when you lift up the pen.
Yep.
It would be a neat feature. I like that idea to have it go immediately. You can slow down and speed up diffusion, and you can pause diffusion. But that's it as far as I know.
Well, to pause diffusion, am I right? The key command is F.
I think it's D for pause.
It's D.
D?
Yeah.
Is it
D,
F for
yes.
freeze? What does F do?
F is a fast dry. So what that'll do is
fast dry.
that'll keep it from diffusing, but it still stays wet. So if you add more water or wet media to it, then it'll diffuse the way that wet media would, but it won't keep moving around the canvas.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify, because I always default to using F because I want the paintings to still stay live, but I oftentimes want to stop the dripping or whatever at a certain point.
Right. Yeah, they can be used really quickly. It makes a big difference if you understand how that diffusion works. So you can get some of those traditional watercolor effects, because otherwise it can be a little tricky just kind of poking around in the software trying to figure out some of those.
It is funny because sometimes I will pause diffusion and then I'll lay down more paint, forgetting that the pause diffusion is still on. And I'll be like, did I run into a bug? And the paint is not moving.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
That's why I use F, because it just it like freezes it in time.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. Someone is asking about if the pro version of Rebelle comes with the traditional artist's color palette.
It does. They both come with the color palettes. And so, if you're looking at getting the pro versus the standard, again, I'll strongly suggest getting the pro. You can use the same exact colors in the standard one from the color palette. It just won't mix as beautifully or as naturally as it does in the pro version with pigments turned on. But yeah, both, but go buy it quickly.
Okay, hardware. We have a couple hardware questions. So one is, what kind of hardware, RAM and CPU, do you need to use nanopixels and metallic on an A4 canvas with several layers? I don't know if you guys know that or not.
Yeah, I would say if you have nothing else running in the background, you could probably figure out how to make it work with 4 gigs of RAM, but I would heavily recommend at least 8. You don't need 16 or 32 or anything insane for it. 8 should be fine. 16 is more than enough.
I do think you have to have a solid GPU though.
It
so
helps a lot.
Yeah, like your GPU better, if it does ray tracing better, it would affect the diffusion. It would affect just how fast it processes it. I personally use an i7 and also 4060. So I don't know if that information will help the person who is asking, but just throwing it out there. Actually, I'll post my stat in chat. And then you guys
my setup is an i9 with a 4050, and I have 16 gigs of RAM. And it won't affect the way your artwork looks. It just might affect how long it takes for your artwork to diffuse, but it should still create the same quality of artwork.
Definitely. And for me, I go heavy on the RAM, but I have an i7 with a 4060 Ti and 32 gigs of RAM because I really like using huge canvases. Because the versatility that gives me at the output, basically. But then with nanopixel, you don't have to be as worried about that. It's just an old trick, from back in the day. We didn't have nanopixel, so. Yeah,
actually, that's a really good thing to bring up about the Pro version with the nano export. So nano export can, when you're exporting, you can select this one, which is the nano pixel export. and then you can select up to 4 times. So even if your canvas is a little smaller, so this is 100%, you can actually export it at a far higher pixel count with very little loss in quality. So you can definitely give that a go if your hardware wants to do something that can handle that at a lower resolution, but you want to export it big. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can create on a small canvas and it'll be fast and fluid, and then you can export it 4 times the size.
Mhm.
And life hack, you can do this with old photos too. You can pull them into Rebelle and export them with a much higher fidelity, but they're going to be like a little bit stylized because of the way the nanopixel works.
But you're
it's
so
pretty
right.
cool.
It's an amazing feature. And it really between that and I also love in the Pro, isn't the Pro distinctive also by allowing you to record your painting sessions?
The
Both
time
have
lapse.
time lapse.
Oh,
Yeah,
both of them.
both
Okay.
standard and Pro.
I love having that built in as well.
Yeah, and it'll start automatically when you restart the program. It'll say, "Hey, do you want to continue your time lapse?" I'm like, "Yes, always." Yeah, every time.
Yeah.
Except for this painting. I hate this one. Undo, undo, undo.
Awesome. Sarajean, this was probably for you. So when you were showing the setup that you were using with the Movink, where you used the Movink down on the surface of your desk, and then you were looking at your monitor in front of you, someone was asking if this works for the Cintiq as well.
Yes, it does work with the Cintiq. It basically works with any of the pen display that you would have, and you can use any of your display. Just use the display toggle. So the display toggle allows you to swap the pen input to any monitor that you want. So you can just do that with ease. Just go into your Wacom Center, go into display toggle, and then have that set up properly. Like for example, if you have 3 monitors, just make sure that you toggle between the 2 monitors that you have. If you have 2 monitors, then don't worry about it. It will just switch between the 2. So yeah.
So you only have to have one Wacom device to have the software work, though. So all the other ones can be whatever they want to be.
Yes. Exactly.
Awesome. Someone is also asking, this is probably a question for the 3 of you, which tablet size would you suggest for different size monitors? I think a lot of that is personal preference, but they're looking for a comfortable drawing experience.
I think it depends on how you use your UI. Like I use Rebelle has a tablet mode that's really well engineered. And so you can open up a single panel for whatever it is you're looking for. If you want to open up the layers, you can open up the layers, or you can open up just one thing and it hides the other stuff in the UI. If you're using full screen mode and you're doing that, you can get away with, have a nice size canvas on something that's 13 inches and comfortable to use in a lot of different places. And Wacom makes some beautiful tablets that do that well. I think depending on how close the monitor is to your screen, like my screen that I'm using is roughly 13 inches, but it sits maybe a foot away from my face, 1.5 feet. And I have eye damage, lots of damage. But it's really comfortable, and I hold my hand up and I draw directly on the screen in front of me. For someone who's got a screen that's 3 feet away, I'm sure it's going to be different.
And all I would add is that if you're going to invest in a tablet, I think it's nice to invest in something that's at least the size that you don't feel like you're drawing on a little postage stamp or like coaster sized thing, because I think even if you're very detail oriented, it's nice to have a little bit of an expansive space to move around on the screen when you draw. And even in using the screen like I do, where I'm painting on the Movink, but it's being projected onto a larger screen. I think something around 12 or 13 inches is kind of my minimum size for me. Yeah,
Daniel, you were talking about how you use, I think, you were talking about how you use your shoulder and your arm when you paint, right? That was you?
Yeah, that's right.
So having Something
ahead.
bigger for you specifically is nicer for that reason. It allows you to be more expressive and gestural.
Absolutely. Gestural is the word. It just feels, you know how when you're drawing and you get that kind of wobble in your line work because you're not
Mhm.
able to really approach the line with like kind of that kind of athletic approach, that kind of big motion. It's nice to be able to have a screen that's big enough to accommodate that.
Yeah. And Wacom has some beautiful big tablets.
Oh man, yes, they do.
Okay. Well, I wanted to share with everyone, thank you everyone for the questions that you submitted. I think this led to some rich dialogue. I did want to share about one additional feature. There is some proprietary software that Wacom has developed in conjunction with our friends at Rebelle. This is called Wacom UEFI, and it's software that we created to protect your artwork. You can use it to embed an invisible micromark into your digital artwork before sharing your content. And that establishes a digital link from your artwork to your creation record in UEFI. And then after that, you can create and manage licenses for this artwork and set terms and permissions for your work. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is, like I said, Rebelle 7 is one of the software programs that supports UEFI. So if you're interested in claiming authorship, safeguarding your digital creations, and establishing secure license agreements, you can visit www.wacom.com/products/UEFI to learn more. And with that, I just want to thank our three artists for coming and sharing your process, sharing your thoughts, your knowledge. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I was inspired by this session, and I hope it was informative and that everyone in the audience took away a tip or two that you can use in your own creative process with Rebelle.
Thank you guys. It was really fun. I learned so much.
I did too. It was great. It was wonderful to meet you all, and you all have definitely taught me a lot as well. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. It was a pleasure.